Hi, and welcome to today's live reading from Mountains Climbed by Phoebe Alexander, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits, Chapter 1, From the Mountains to the Desert. 6 inches. That's about how far away the blast felt as the sound rang in his ears and the impact rushed through his body. Of course, it was much, much further away. Just arrived in Kabul, and things are already fucking nuts. Nice welcome back. Memories from his past tours come hurtling down onto his shoulders all at once. Explosions, falling friends, the fear, the uncertainty, the longing for home. One day down and approximately 269 to go. A more seasoned soldier had advised during his first deployment, don't even think about getting through the 9 months or even the next week. If you need to, just think about getting through the next hour. When it was finally all clear, he tried to scan the horizon to see if there were still explosions going off in the distance, but it was hard to distinguish the sky from the sand, the two stretching for miles and miles. It was a wasteland without boundaries, a vacuum. He calculated the time difference between the base in Afghanistan and Ohio, where Maggie was preparing to drive his car back to Maryland. She won't be leaving for about another 8 hours. He tried to convince her to wait till closer to the end of his deployment to leave her job and family, but she was so anxious she didn't want to wait to start her new life. Our new life, he corrected himself. He saw her illuminated face, thick-lashed hazel eyes creased with a beaming smile as she happily accepted his proposal and slid the diamond ring down her long, thin finger. She pushed her golden blonde curls away from her forehead and held her hand out to admire the brilliant rock perched on top of her sun-kissed skin. "Oh my God, my sister's going to be so jealous," she cooed, her first words after, "yes." It struck James as odd. Not, "I love you so much and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you," but "my sister will be jealous." What the fuck is that? He brushed it off because it was immediately followed by an embrace, a kiss, and confirmation of how excited she was to be Mrs. James McAllister. Then she spewed out suggestions regarding dates, colours, venues, and cakes. He turned the other direction, towards the foreboding mountains rising in the distance with their brown and grey striations. He could no longer look at mountains and not think of Dr. Sarah Lind, the woman who'd been his friend and lover for the last 9 months he was in Maryland. He'd met her quite by chance at a panel discussion about the military's don't ask, don't tell policy on the campus where they both taught. He in the ROTC programme and she in the sociology department. Funny how we got from point A to point B. The last time he saw her, he told her he was going to propose to his high school sweetheart, Maggie Carson. It occurred to him that Sarah was, at that moment, attending her best friend Rachel's wedding in the Rockies. He wasn't sure what time the ceremony began, but he knew how badly she'd wanted him to accompany her. They'd spent a few days together in Colorado in March when she was there for a conference. He'd surprised her by showing up unannounced and uninvited at her hotel a week after she'd walked out on him following a fight. He'd nearly sabotaged their relationship, and he wanted to convey how important she was to him, so he went after her. Impulsive? Maybe. A calculated risk? Definitely. But it paid off. Among other things, they'd gone hiking in the Garden of the Gods. An image of Sarah framed by the red rocks, twirling while the sun glinted in her dark hair, flashed into his mind. He had a sudden pang of regret. He hated the way things had to end. If only we'd had a little more time to transition to more of a friendship. I should write and let her know I'm safe. He squinted as he turned back to the sun. I wonder if she even wants to hear from me. He was finally beginning to get his bearings. It never failed to amaze him how quickly he could transition, as if he flipped the switch from one way of life to the other. The guard goes up, you're always on alert. This was a different forward operating base, FOB, than he'd been at in his prior deployments, so there was a new layout to learn. He jogged around the 4.23-mile perimeter a couple of times now. 9 months will be over before I know it. He envisioned Maggie walking down the aisle in a white dress. That image is going to pull me through. Just got to keep moving. The entire FOB calmed down from the earlier attack by dinner time, everything returning to status quo. He'd gone to bed early, but he was restless and couldn't sleep. He found himself trekking through the sand again to combat the insomnia. Still getting used to the time difference, and still a little keyed up from earlier. Nothing like being welcomed back to the Middle East with an attack. The night was dark and lonely, with no stars and no moon. He could barely see the outline of the mountains in the distance as he walked along the edges of the fences and barbed wire, his boots pressing firmly into the sandy soil. He thought he saw a bright flash of light in the distance towards the rocks, but when he squinted and blinked, only darkness remained. A sensation of warmth enveloped him, flushing his skin while prickling his skin in a spiny chill. A tingle permeated his veins as if he'd just been injected with a sedative, like when he'd had his last appendix taken out several years before. But instead of succumbing to the beckoning siren of sleep, he felt a sense of wakeful peace seep into him, filtrating through every cell in his body. What the hell was that about? He took a few steps away from the mountains, still waiting for the sensation to dissipate. Feeling a presence beside him, he turned in all directions to check if he was still alone. I should have been put on edge by that, but I'm not. His heart rate was steady, his adrenaline levels in check. It's like I experienced some sort of cosmic event, but on a metaphysical level. He shook his head, laughing at the geek in him coming out, even if it was only to the dark, lonely night. Sarah would have been eager to discuss his experience, to speculate if its cause was mundane or supernatural, whether time travel or an encounter with an extraterrestrial. Her dark eyes would quizzically study his expressions and body language, searching for answers. Little did he know, Sarah would have loved to contemplate potential explanations with him, but at that precise moment she was standing on a mountaintop watching her best friend getting married, while simultaneously experiencing her own metaphysical event. Immediately after watching her best friend walk down the aisle, Sarah felt the wound from her breakup with James exposed to air again, peeling off the scab that had just formed. She wasn't sure if she should return to Maryland. I don't know if I can be there without him yet. I'm not ready. Her heart trembled with grief, her world turned upside down and inside out. I don't know how not to be James and Sarah anymore. The wedding had just delayed the healing process rather than helping her forget like she'd hoped. She almost changed her flight at the last minute to Seattle to see her brother Adam, since he hadn't been able to meet the family in Colorado for the wedding. Once Rachel was happily off on her honeymoon, she gave him a call. Adam shared the Lind intuition, and she scarcely let any word escape her mouth before he guessed her heart had been trampled upon. I don't understand what he sees in this Maggie woman, he kept repeating after hearing the situation. I mean, he barely knows her, right? I bet she's changed a lot since high school. They shed a few tears together across the wire. Adam was no stranger to heartbreak and offered a strong shoulder for his sister to lean on. But the day of their conversation, Sarah's tears dried up quickly and her pragmatic side took the reins. She easily justified James's reasons for choosing Maggie, for choosing at all. Well, we've spent some time recently together when he was in Ohio over Christmas, she explained to her brother. And then he went back again for his mother's birthday. She came here for a week before he deployed, plus he saw her again in Ohio before leaving for Afghanistan. So they've spent lots of time together in the past 6 months. I don't know much about her really. All I know is she's a nurse. I don't even know what she looks like. She was trapped in a pendulum, oscillating between optimism and rejection. 1 minute she believed everything happened as it did for a reason, for her to learn something from it. Now her only choice was to wish James happiness. But the next moment she wallowed in self-pity. Her heart shattered into a million pieces. Between the two extremes, she saw tiny specks of hope sprinkled in, wondering if someday he would change his mind and realise he wanted her after all. Does absence really make the heart grow fonder? So you're going to be all right? Adam asked. Sarah could feel his love and concern wrapping around her even from hundreds of miles away. Yes, of course, she replied. Not that I couldn't use a hug from my little brother. Adam erupted with a deep golden bellow of a laugh. I wish it would work out for you guys to come out right now, but things are crazy this week. Brandon and I are going to come see you guys soon, though, I promise. We both have some time off this fall. I can't wait to see you and meet Brandon. You sound so happy, Sarah observed. That makes me happy too. Adam was happy. Rachel was happy. I'm in control of my happiness, Sarah reminded herself, as the pilot came on to announce their approach into Baltimore. I am in control. I can choose to be happy. As the plane touched down, she convinced herself that her future was worth fighting for, that happiness was not an intangible dream, but right within her grasp. And for several hours afterwards, she even believed it. Just when she thought she was settling back into her safe little world in Maryland, beginning to heal, she made a miscalculation. The pragmatic was temporarily replaced with the rational. She found herself in her little red Toyota, racing towards Laurel, the town where James had lived before his deployment. She cringed as she passed the spot where she'd nearly lost her life to a drunk driver, whom she later found out was one of her former students. It had only been 3 months since that fateful night. Her spine crawled with regret that she'd been on that road late at night after fighting with James. If only I'd got back into bed. If only I'd been in his arms where I should have been. It didn't seem to matter how much positive self-talk she spewed into the space between her ears, she couldn't eradicate the guilt she felt. And here she was, retracing her steps, feeling it all consume her again. Even now she was also having regrets about James. She had thought, standing on the mountain top, gazing at the silvery summit of Pikes Peak as her best friend Rachel recited her wedding vows, that she would never regret loving James, even though, in the end, her prophecy that her heart would be broken was fulfilled. She had thought, standing there in the mountains, that the experience and growth were all worth the pain. But back home in Maryland, so far removed from her homeland, there was a persistent dull ache, the constant feel that her body had been invaded and someone was holding part of her to ransom. At the moment, the only lesson I've learned is to keep my stupid fucking walls up. So why am I driving to his house? One word: closure. She knew it was irrational, but she felt no less compelled to see it through. She'd heard nothing from him since he left Maryland. She rounded the corner towards his street and flashed back to their last night together. 2.5 weeks had passed, but it felt like an eternity since they made love for the last time, since the morning she'd walked through his empty house, silently uttering her goodbyes. She'd taken an army jacket from his closet, which was neatly folded in her back seat. She wanted to leave it in his screened-in porch, but she was pretty sure it was unlocked. She felt bad for taking it in the first place. How am I supposed to move on if I still have his stuff around? Should I have fought harder? She'd given him a speech on the beach at Assateague the weekend before they celebrated his 30th birthday. The speech where she offered to have his baby and promised to do virtually anything to be with him. What else could I have said? What else could I have done? She gripped the steering wheel as if it would help her fight the tears that threatened to flow. Or did I just come off as a desperate fool? The what-ifs haunted her as much as her regret.